Good morning, everyone. I'm Pastor Dan from Rexmont Church here in Rexmont, Pennsylvania, the southern end of beautiful Lebanon County, Pennsylvania. I've been on vacation for the last 3 weeks. Got a chance to fly to Kenya, that flag, and spend some really good time with friends and family there. Saw the last class that I taught at Rift Valley Academy graduate, and just had a great time getting back home again. Now back here in Pennsylvania, looking forward to digging back into ministry here at Rexmont. I encourage you to come and join us at Rexmont Church. Uh, Sunday school starts at 9:30 on Sundays, worship service at 10:45. Come and join us. Be a part of what God is doing here in Pennsylvania, and as an extension, what God is doing in Kenya and what God is doing in other places around the world. This morning, we're going to look at a topic that I have to put in a disclaimer when I do this topic. Um, the topic is, what does train up a child in the way he should go mean? And my disclaimer is, I'm a single guy. I'm a single pastor. I don't have kids myself, but I have taught a number of kids over the 25 years of teaching. And I was a youth pastor, and so I do know a little bit, but I'm not an expert in this. But I've gotten some help and dug and did some research, and I think this is going to be a good sermon topic for this morning. The overall big idea of the sermon series is that if we train our kids to succeed in athletics or academics or the arts, but ultimately they go to hell for eternity, we've failed them as parents. We cannot force our kids to accept Christ, but we must do everything in our power to lead them to Christ. And when you consider the fact that heaven and hell are real and that your child will spend eternity in one or the other, and that the only way to eternal life is through Jesus Christ, then parenting takes on a completely different shape. Now, I know that many of you might not have children anymore. Your children are all grown, but I know in our society there are many parents that are struggling with how do we train up our children. And there are many grandparents that are trying to raise their own grandchildren. And so I think this passage of scripture in Proverbs 22:6 is going to be a good one to look at. The way that Christians raise their children should be radically different from the way the world raises their children. We're not just training our kids to be a success in life, but a success in eternity. We're not just concerned with their temporary happiness, but with their eternal happiness. We're not only concerned with our kids just fitting in, but with getting into heaven. And Proverbs 22:6 in the ESV version says, train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Charles Spurgeon, the great pastor from the 1800s, said, he who thinks it's easy to bring up a family never had one of his own. A mother who trains her children right has need to be wiser than Solomon because his son turned out a fool. Interesting point of view. Parenting is not easy. And so today what I want to do is I want to point out 5 principles for training a child that come, I think, out of this verse here in Proverbs. And the first one is, of course, children need training. God's commands are our needs. God doesn't command us unless it's good for us. God's commands reveal our needs. God's commands meet our needs. We know what our children need from what the Bible commands us to do for them, and it commands us to train them. And I think children need training for 3 reasons. First of all, for their ignorance. In the beginning of Proverbs, Solomon gives the reasons for writing his Proverbs. And in Proverbs 1:4, the reason he gives is for giving prudence to those who are simple. knowledge and discretion to the young. So children don't know a lot of stuff. Young children, they have to be taught. That's why you have to be with them and teach them. Don't touch the hot stove. They don't know not to touch the hot stove until they learn it. Children don't know right from wrong. They are inexperienced. They lack knowledge and discretion. And they need to be taught about who God is and how to please Him. They need to be taught that it's wrong to hurt others, to lie, to steal, to disobey. I think a second reason children need training is for their immaturity. Proverbs 29, verse 15, a rod and a reprimand impart wisdom, but a child left undisciplined disgraces its mother. Children may know what is right, but without training, they don't have the willpower to choose what is right. If you let the child, a young child, make all the decisions, they'll most likely make bad decisions because of their lack of willpower. You don't go to a child and say, "Hey, what do you want for supper?" Because the kid will say, "Reese's peanut butter cups." And that's not a good choice. They they may know that it's wrong to steal, but they don't have the maturity level to resist temptation. They may even desire to do what is right, but they lack the strength of character to do it because they're immature. The third reason for training our children is for what I call their inclination. That's an old time word, SAT word, as I used to say. The word inclination means that the fact that you prefer or are more likely to act in a particular way. Proverbs 22, verse 15 says, "Folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far away." Children and many adults who are not trained appropriately do not want to do what is right. They may know what is right, but they want to do evil. They are naturally foolish. And just to make sure you understand, the word foolish in the Bible does not mean stupid. It means wicked. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. Every child has inherited the sin nature of Adam and Eve. So our natural inclination as humans is to do what is wrong and not what is right. Children's natural inclination is self-centeredness. Mine, not God centeredness. Their natural inclination is selfishness, not love. Several different translations of Proverbs 22:15 make this very clear. The International Standard Version begins, it says, "A child's heart has a tendency to do wrong." The Living Bible translation says, "A youngster's heart is filled with rebellion." Now, I've been fortunate to I don't know if this is true or not. I've been fortunate to not own a home. I rent. When my fridge died last year, I called the landlord, and a couple days later, a new fridge showed up at my house. That being said, I am beginning to look at the possibilities at some point in the little bit more distant future of buying a house. But I know that owning a house is difficult. Owning a house requires constant upkeep. Without care and proper maintenance, your home deteriorates. It's the same thing with children. Without proper training, your children will go the wrong way. They'll do evil rather than good. They'll run from God rather than to God. They'll hate God rather than love God. Children need training. Second, I think, is that parents must embrace the role of trainer. And that's the parent's job. Certainly, parents can enlist outside help with people to help them train. People from the church, their teachers at school, especially grandparents. But the primary trainer of a child is supposed to be the parent. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4, Paul writes, "Fathers," and that includes mothers, "fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord." A parent is not an advisor. And a parent, and I hesitate to say this, but I think it's true. A parent is not a friend or a peer or a chauffeur or Santa Claus. A parent is a trainer. If a parent is a trainer, then a parent's job is to prepare. Now, I'm not saying you can't be a friend to your child or you can't chauffeur your child around or anything like that, but your job is to train. The job is to prepare, and that's the meaning of training, to prepare your kids. Well, what are we preparing our kids for? Well, I think there's three things we prepare our kids for. First of all, we prepare our kids for life's mission. Our key verse today, train up a child in the way he should go, Proverbs 22:6 in the Passion Translation starts, dedicate your children to God. Your child was created to live for God. Christ saved them to live for him. Your job is to prepare them to be useful tools in the hands of God, to serve God for the rest of their lives. We need to train our children, prepare our children for life's battles, for life's challenges. Psalm 144, verse 1, praise be the Lord, my rock, who trains my hands for war, my fingers for battle. Well, there are a lot of life's battles out there. Your child, and I don't want to say this, but it's true, your child is headed for troubled waters. They're headed for the storm. They'll face very difficult trials in their lives, sickness, financial challenges, rejection, failure, death of a loved one, spiritual warfare. Your job is to prepare them for these battles, prepare them to win life's battles. And third, we need to prepare our children for life's decisions. Our key verse, Proverbs 22:6, verse 22:6 in the Living Bible says, teach a child to choose the right path. The older your child gets, the more decisions they'll make without you. It's easy for them to make good choices when you're making choices for them, but your job is to prepare them to make good choices on their own. Don't merely show them the path, teach them to choose the right path. Life is filled with landmines. Satan has laid traps all over the paths of our lives. Peer pressure, sexual immorality, drugs and alcohol, laziness, pornography, atheism, evolution, transgenderism, homosexuality, false teachers, credit card debt, get rich quick schemes, divorce. We must prepare them for life's landmines. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Don't take it for granted that your child will grow up or become an adult. Thousands of young people die every year before they grow old because they were taken out by one of life's landmines. Right now in the United States, the leading cause of childhood deaths is firearm related, either homicides, accidental or suicide in kids ages 1 to 19. There are a lot of landmines out there. We need to train our children to make good decisions. You may be raising your kids, but are you training them? Tim Elmore wrote a great book on parenting. It's called 12 Huge Mistakes Parents Can Avoid. And in it, he wrote, the greatest gift parents can give their children is the ability to get along without them. How do we prepare our children? Fortunately, God has not only told us what we are to do to train our children, but he's given us the training manual, the Bible. 2 Timothy 3:16, all scripture is God breathed and is profitable for teaching, for rebuking, for correcting, and for training in righteousness. The best way to train and prepare our kids for life is to teach them to understand and believe what the Bible says. The third principle for training a child is that children require boundaries. Many parents make the mistakes of allowing their children to make too many decisions too early on. They give their children too many options. They let the child decide what to eat and when to eat and how much he eats. They let the child decide what school to attend, what church to attend, or whether to attend at all. They let the child decide what to wear, what to watch on TV. They give the child pretty much anything she asks for. Cable TV in your bedroom? Sure, go ahead. A smartphone? Yep. They let the child choose which activity to participate in. They don't make their child do anything. It's all up to the child themselves. That's foolish parenting, and it's not training. Remember, we already mentioned in under point one that children are ignorant, immature, and inclined to evil. A third of the time, they don't know what's best. They're ignorant. Another third of the time, they know what's best, but they don't have the willpower to do it. They're immature. And that last third of the time, they know what's best, but they don't want to. They're inclined to evil. Children need boundaries. The Hebrew word for train up means to hedge in, to form a boundary around something. Your job as a parent or a grandparent raising children is to form boundaries around your child. It's a big part of training. I didn't join the military, but I know several of you here this morning did. Those of you that were in the military, think back to your time in basic training. The trainee soldiers don't make any decisions. They follow orders. They're told what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and how to feel about it. They're told when to wake up, what to wear it, how to make their bed, what to eat, how much to eat. Just about every second of their day is planned for them. All decisions are made for them so that when they graduate from basic training, they're prepared to make the right choices on their own. A parent is not a drill sergeant, but you are a trainer. You must decide what a young child should wear because they can't. You must decide what a young child should eat because they can't. You must decide what activities a young child should participate in because they can't. You must decide whether your young child should own a smartphone because they can't. You must decide who their friends should be because they can't. The younger your child is, the more boundaries they need, the more decisions you should make for them. And when they get older, if you've trained them well, then they can make more and more of their own choices, and those choices will be wise. I'm hoping kids that are in their teens are making mostly wise choices at this point. But as parents, we need to start with good training when they're young so that when they're older, they won't depart from it. As parents, we need to give our children boundaries. The preacher's complete homiletic commentary says if the parent does not set a hedge about his son's path, he is only making it certain that he will encounter thorns and snares further on in life. This one's tough. Training should be hard. Hebrews 12:11. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. Training is not enjoyable, it's painful. Effective training is hard, not easy. It's uncomfortable, it's challenging. Go back to that example of basic training for the military. Basic training is not easy. It's not supposed to be easy. It's hard. It's supposed to be hard. The drill sergeant's goal is not your happiness, your comfort, or your fun. His goal is your preparation. Easy training makes for weak trainees. And that's got to be your mindset as a parent. If you want your child to succeed in life and in eternity, then your mind must be on preparation, not just protection. And that means that you must guard against making life too easy for your kids. The best drill sergeants are the toughest, the hardest, the most challenging. Why? Because the harder they train, the more prepared the soldier is. The best coaches are the toughest, the strictest. Why? Because the harder the coach, the better the team. The harder the practice, the easier the game. The tougher the coach, the more the team is prepared for battle in the field. A drill sergeant is a trainer, a coach is a trainer, and a parent is a trainer. Now, please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that parents should be unaffectionate and unloving. I'm not saying that parents should be authoritarian and abusive and domineering. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying is that if a parent's job is to train and the best trainers are tough, then parents need to consider how they're raising their kids. Many parents make it their mission in life to protect their child from everything, from all pain and all hardship and all failure and all sadness. They bubble wrap their child, but that's not training. That's crippling a child. It's okay to make your child happy, but your job is not to make them happy. Your job is to train them. Your job is not to make your child comfortable. Your job is to train them. Your job is not to entertain your child, but to train them. Your job is not to protect your child from all pain and failure and sadness. Your job is to prepare them for those things. And effective training involves pain and hardship. And you can do that while still making things fun and still making your child happy and still protecting your child to a degree. But sometimes they need to make mistakes and learn from their mistakes and learn that life isn't fair. Most parents are way too easy on their kids. Tim Elmore's book on parenting that I mentioned earlier is a good book for parents. And if you want to get it, the title once again, 12 Huge Mistakes Parents Can Avoid. The whole thesis of the book is that most parents today are not preparing their children. They're pampering their children. They're coddling their children and therefore crippling their children. He says that most parents are so easy on their kids that it's almost a form of child abuse because instead of preparing them for success, they're setting them up for failure as adults. Let me share you one of the couple of mistakes that he writes about. He says, we won't let them fail. We prioritize being happy. We remove consequences. We won't let them struggle or fight. We give them what they should earn for themselves. We we give them what they should earn for themselves. We praise too much and too easily and for the wrong reasons. We value removing all pain. We do it for them instead of making them do it. We reward too frequently. Tim Elmore says that the problem of modern parenting boils down to this: we prepare the path for the child instead of the child for the path. We try to make the path trouble-free, pain-free, failure-free, consequence-free, struggle-free, and they live like kings and queens as children, but we're setting them up for failure as adults. Adults who can't handle failure. They can't handle consequences. They can't handle responsibility. They can't handle hardship. They can't handle the struggle. They can't handle pain. Why? Because we make sure they don't face any of those things as kids. Now, again, I want to reiterate, parents shouldn't be harsh and abusive and domineering, but when every child gets a trophy simply because they participated in, we're setting our kids up for future failure. Last, children must be trained up for God. What does it mean to train up a child in the way he should go? There are two main interpretations of this passage in Proverbs 22:6. Some believe that it's a call for parents to train up a child according to his natural inclinations, bent. In other words, don't try and fit a square peg into a round hole. If the child really wants to be a teacher, don't force them to be a nurse. And I guess that's good advice, but I don't think that's what the verse means at all. Well, I believe the meaning is moral training and spiritual training, not vocational training. The King James Study Bible says parental training should help children develop a taste for the things of God. Matthew Henry said this verse refers to the propagating of wisdom. NIV Zondervan Bible says it refers to early moral training. In other words, to train up a child in the way he should go is to train up a child to be fully devoted to God. There are three phrases I want to highlight as we come to a close here in Proverbs 22:6. Train up the way and should go. First, your job is to train up your kids. Every child is trained, but not every child is trained up. Your job is to dedicate your children to God, to point them to God, to prepare them to serve God for the rest of their lives. Your job is to train your kids to see things above. Colossians 3:2, set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. Second, your job is to train up in the way. What way? The God's way. Psalm 18:21, for I have kept the ways of the Lord. I am not guilty of turning from my God. Your job is to train your child in the way of the Lord. In fact, the early Christians were called the way. Why? Because in John 14:6, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. Jesus is the way. Your job as a parent is to train up your kids in the way of Jesus, to love and worship and obey and follow and live for Jesus. And third, your job is to train up your child in the way they should go. Not in the way you want to go or they want to go. Not in the way you want them to go. Not in the way the world wants them to go. Proverbs 16:25, there is a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death. Your job is to train in the way they should go. Your job is to help your children in the way they want to go, or to encourage is not. Your job is not to help your children in the way they want to go or encourage your children to find their own way. Your job is not to support your kids whatever way they choose. Your job is to train up your child in the way they should go, is to point them to God and to his way of living. Teach them that there is a right and there is a wrong, and they should choose the right. Teach them there is truth and falsehood, and that they should choose Jesus, who is the truth. Teach them that there is a God, and they should choose to love and serve him. A couple of things I need to clarify about this passage. First, it says, when they grow old, they will not depart from it. And I want to say that what this verse is not saying, this verse is not a guarantee. It's not a promise that if you train up your kids to follow Jesus, they're sure to follow Jesus. Why do I say that? This is a proverb. It's not a promise. A proverb is a wise saying about the way life usually works. It's a principle, but we all know there are exceptions. But the exceptions tend to prove the rule. In general, overall, whichever way a child is pointed when he's young will determine the direction he walks for the rest of his life. But you also need to understand that there are many examples of ungodly people who were raised by very godly parents. And there are many godly people who were raised by very ungodly parents. When a child goes in the opposite way of his upbringing, it's the exception, not the rule. It's a child going a certain way in spite of his parents rather than because of his parents. A huge thing to remember is that a parent cannot force his child to follow the right path, to choose the right path. If this was a promise, then parents would be responsible for the salvation of their children. The Bible says that's not the case. Ezekiel 18:20, the one who sins is the one who dies. The child will not share the guilt of the parent, nor the parent share the guilt of the child. So if this verse, Proverbs is not a promise, what is it? It is a proverb, a wise saying about the way life usually works. Usually the way you train your child is the way that they will travel for life. Jesus said it like this in Luke 6:40. A disciple is not above his teacher, but everyone who is fully trained will be like his teacher. A person who's fully trained will be like his teacher. That's the way life usually works. It's unusual, odd, the exception when it turns out otherwise. This verse is a great reminder of the opportunity that you have as parents. Children are highly trainable. They're impressionable, moldable like clay, teachable, humble, trusting. They're not set in their ways. They've been exposed to fewer bad ideas, and the way you train them will be highly influential for the rest of their life. The best time to train someone for God is when they are young. This verse is not a guarantee that your children will go the way you train them, but it's an assurance that they probably will. At the same time, this verse is a reminder of the great responsibility we have as parents. How you train your child is of great consequences. There's hope for parents, because while this verse does not guarantee that your children will go the right way, there's hope. There's a sense in which your child will never depart from your training. There are two Bible translations of Proverbs 22:6 that draw this out, I think, a little bit better than the NIV. The Good News translation: teach children how they should live, and they will remember it all their life. And in the Passion translation: dedicate your children to God and point them in the way they should go, and the values they've learned from you will be with them for life. Warren Wiersbe, author and pastor, wrote, certainly children reared in the nurture and instruction of the Lord can stray from God, but they can never get away from the prayers of their parents or the seeds that have been planted in their hearts. The training you give them will never leave their memories. They'll never escape the impressions you make on them. They will keep the spiritual seeds that you planted in them, the examples that you set for them, the traditions that you ingrained in them. They'll never unlearn the lessons that you teach them. They may depart from your training, but your training will never depart from them. They may deny the truth, but they cannot depart from the truth. They can never get away from your training, from your love, from your example, or from your prayers. So for those of you who have had children who are trained in the way they should go, but they're not walking in the way of the Lord, don't lose heart.